And okay, Nicholas Britell, you were the composer of The Big Short. Tell us how you got involved with that.
Absolutely. So I actually worked with Jeremy Kleiner and Dee Dee Gardner on 12 Years a Slave. And I was talking to Jeremy earlier in the year, and he said, I have this script I'd love you to read. And he sent The Big Short. And, immediately I was fascinated by that. And, he was like, oh, if you have any musical ideas, send them over. And so I put an email together of some thoughts, and I attached a few tracks of music to it. And Adam listened to the music that I attached and loved it, and we just started talking, and it sort of went from there.
Well, what spoke to you about it specifically, that made you think, I can write music for this?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, I've always been a composer my whole life, and I started out as a classical pianist, and in college I did some hip hop. I was actually in a hip hop band, and I scored my first movie. But towards the end of college, like, my band was breaking up, and the movie I'd scored didn't come out, and I actually got a job. I interviewed with someone who was a composer who worked on Wall Street, and I actually got a job early on trading currencies, like, as a day job. And it was this fascinating thing where I saw this whole other world, and at night was scoring movies and short films and giving concerts, and then eventually obviously left to pursue my passion for composing. But the thought of kind of bringing some of that background to this, and I had always thought a little bit about the markets and what that might sound like, actually. And so when I first started talking to Adam about it, he didn't know that I had ever traded currencies or anything like that at all. But we were talking about this idea of, like, what is the sound of the markets? Like, what is the sound of, like, mathematics? What is the sound of, like, a dark math? And it was just very fascinating to sort of bring some of these different perspectives to bear on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So explain, if you can.
Sure.
I know this is sort of an esoteric kind of thing.
Yeah.
What are the sounds of mathematics? How did you come up with these themes?
Sure, absolutely. Well, there's a few themes which really exemplify that in the movie. The main one, I think, which is sort of the premier example of that, is the piece that plays in the film as everyone's leaving Vegas, as they're all getting in the cars. And it's this piece of music which is like 6 pianos all layered at once, with all these sort of interlocking layers. And then underneath it, there's this very deep sub bass. And I had this idea, I guess, that the sound of math, at least, was something that would feel very kind of like complicated, but stable and unstable at the same time. That was kind of the metaphor, I guess, I was thinking in my mind, of this sort of like stable instability or unstable stability or something like that, because it felt like that's kind of what the financial markets are. They're these things which seem really, really stable, but are actually quite unstable, or vice versa,
Right.
And the piano felt like an interesting, the piano is a very mathematical instrument. I mean, to some extent, all music and all instruments are mathematical, but the piano, even just the way that it looks, the way that it's gridded out visually, it's very mathematical. And the modern tuning of the piano too, the way that everything's lined up in equal temperament is sort of a big math exercise. So the piano felt like a good instrument for expressing that. And then we did some fun stuff to it where I had this feeling that we wanted to distort the sounds in a way. So throughout the film, especially during the bubble years of the film, because early on in the movie, there's this sort of 1970s funk stuff, big band that I wrote. And then at the end, there's this pure solo piano. But in the main section of the movie, I took a lot of the instruments and would run them through filters and guitar amplifiers, and I would take the sounds, run them through vinyl. There's this sort of constant vinyl layer in a lot of the music throughout the middle of the movie. And even in one of the scenes under the Murakami quote, there's just the vinyl playing, almost like the sound of, like, the music stopped and it's just this sort of record player, with nothing playing. So there were a lot of sounds like that I then layered with those pianos to get that idea of almost like a distorted math,
Mm-hmm.
So.
So now that you've written these themes, just talk about, from a technical standpoint, laying them into the movie. You know, were you working from a temp track, or, you know, how did you put those in the movie?
Actually, what was awesome with this project, and it was very unique, and it was something that I really loved so much, was we all, Hank Corwin, the editor, Adam, and I, basically were in the same room all summer, you know, up close and working on every element of the movie together. So I got involved, you know, I started working on music ideas pretty much from the script, but while they were shooting. And, you know, I became my own temp in a way. Like, I would start writing things, and that was the first thing that would go into the movie. You know, there were, that math sort of end of Vegas cue. That was the first one that I played for Adam, and he really loved it. And he was like, that's going in the movie somewhere, you know. And so we then, you know, I mean, we looked at all the different parts of the film, and obviously some of the music, you know, some of the source tracks, for example, are real tracks that we know some of the characters listen to. Like Michael Burry really loves heavy metal music, so those tracks were actually things he listened to. So some of that was even in the screenplay, like this is some of the music. But for much of the movie, you know, it was new stuff that we just tried out. And actually, I would say too, some of the tracks that sound like they're source cues, like licensed tracks, are actually score as well. Like, you know, all that big band stuff in the beginning is score. And, you know, even like the hip hop beat under Margot Robbie in the bathtub is score. You know, there was a lot of all the karaoke music in Vegas in the bar. That's all me doing score. You know, we had a lot of fun with that, where we'd say, oh, you know, Adam would be like, hey, can you write like a really whack electronica track? And I would say, sure. You know, so then that would go like in the gym when Gosling's working out, you know. So we had fun with a lot of those things. But yeah, I mean, the way it worked was this incredibly close collaboration, which I think I would love every project to happen that way, because I think we got a chance to workshop everything so closely. And, you know, Adam and Hank were able to work on things with me there, and I could immediately get a sense of what they were looking for. Or conversely, they could immediately respond to a piece of music that I was writing. And so there was this very fun kind of back and forth that we had.
Mm-hmm. Well, to that end, was there anything that you wrote that you loved that you had to ultimately cut out because it didn't quite fit with the movie?
It's a good question. You know, funny enough, there was a cool cue for the end of the film, for under the titles at the very end of the movie, which we all loved, and it's a pretty piece of music. But we watched the movie over, you know, sort of in the late summer, and we were all kind of like, I think the movie needs a bigger kick at the end. And Adam came up with the idea of the Zeppelin track there, so which is a much better idea than the score cue I had there. But that score cue, even though, excuse me, even though it didn't wind up there, it inspired some other themes that I ended up using in other places in the film. So, you know, everything in the scoring process, I feel, even if something doesn't wind up exactly where you think, it has this cool cumulative effect of you know, influencing your perspective on the movie. So yeah, but that was one place where there was a cue that in a very positive way did not wind up in the movie.
So you're still relatively new as a composer. What is it that you look for in the projects that you want to work on?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, I'm definitely new. Like, this was my first sort of larger studio film. I've done a lot of independent projects, and you know, I've worked for a long time on, you know, I guess sort of smaller scale productions. But you know, what I look for, honestly, what was so resonant for me on this project was that it's a very important story and a very powerful story. I think people don't realize the extent to which we live in this unbelievably financialized world, which is so complicated, actually. And one thing I really loved about the fact that Adam wanted to make this movie was that it was a chance to sort of explore those ideas and tackle the sophistication of it head on, in a way that was actually very fun and exciting, without diluting any of the meaning of it, you know? So I think to be able to work on projects where there's a great team, but also the movie itself has a cool inner spirit or inner story like that was very inspiring. I would say for sure, I mean, 12 Years a Slave for me was the same kind of thing, having worked, I wrote the on-camera music for that. I wrote and researched all the 1800s spiritual songs and the violin music and on-camera music for that. And that was, for me, again, a similarly meaningful, unforgettable kind of experience. So, obviously those are both very special films, but I think that's something that for sure is special when you can find projects that do have that extra sort of layer of meaning there.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on the film. Really great work.
Thank you so much. Yeah, good talking to you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you. Nice talking to you too. Have a good day.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.